right, so this week I'm going to be making I'm going to try to do as many as I can, some videos about the nervous system. So basically, if you want to give a brief introduction to the nervous system, this is really probably the most important organ system in the body to understand because of the functions that the nervous system plays in our body. Okay, the nervous system is responsible for coordination and integration, meaning basically it coordinates and regulates how the body works based on sensation. Basically, when I say sensation, think of stimuli. Okay, various factors that affect our physiology. Okay, and there's many different stimuli from the internal and external environment of our bodies that will influence the nervous system, that will influence our normal daily biologic physiologic activity. Okay, so based on sensory input, based on how we monitor the activity and the environment of our body, we coordinate and regulate how everything works. Okay, every tissue in the body is regulated by the nervous system. Okay, whether we're talking about a blood vessel, we're talking about a muscle, we're talking about the spleen, we're talking about any organ. Okay, the activity of that organ is regulated by the nervous system. Okay, so again, if you want to think of it in terms of functions, think of coordination and integration, regulating activity of the body. Okay, and like I said though, it can regulate activity without knowing what's going on, without understanding the internal environment and the external environment. Okay, because remember, the outside world affects how the inner workings of our physiology works. Okay, such things like temperature changes, something physically touching us, something harmful to us, okay, whatever it may be. All right, so basically when you combine, these two functions, sensation and coordination, we can have regulation, okay? So like a computer, basically, and, you have input coming into some kind of mother processor, all right, and then, you'll have a combination of new information coming into the processor and already stored data within the processing system. Okay, obviously our brain isn't like a computer program. There aren't programs that are stored in there, but we have, memory in our brain. Memory from, experiences in our lives. Physiologic memory, psychologic memory. Okay, so that, and the beauty of having that memory there is it makes us more efficient at regulation. Okay, because we're going to come in contact with a lot of the same type of sensory stimuli. And as a result, we'll get more efficient at physiologically handling these. Okay? So by using new information and already stored information, our brain and our spinal cord, mainly the brain, can help us regulate all the activities of the body. Okay? Like I said, this is big because any significant damage to parts of the nervous system, we can lose something. We could lose something as minor as maybe lose feeling in an area, have anesthesia in an area of the skin, to something as major as not being able to walk, not being able to breathe on your own, heck, not having a consciousness. Okay, depending on the extent of the damage and where the damage occurs. All right, so the nervous system, this is a big one to understand. And also, this is a big one to understand just because of a lot of core aspects of physiology revolve around this, which we'll talk later about, the action potential, membrane potential, which I've discussed before. Okay. Now, if you want to break the nervous system down into its functional parts, we can break it down into two major divisions. The central nervous system, abbreviated CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, abbreviated PNS. Okay? And simply, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay? Think of these as the processing aspects of the nervous system. Okay? The spinal cord is like the information superhighway. Okay? Sensory information always goes in. Okay, sensory information, from nerves, the peripheral nerves carry sensory information into the spinal cord. That information travels up to the brain. Now, sometimes the spinal cord may initiate a reflex depending on what type of information comes in. Okay, like if you touch a hot object, okay, you're going to pull back before that information completely gets up to the brain, okay, to prevent the, extensive tissue damage. Okay, but again, we'll talk more about that later on. All right, so you've got the spinal cord and the brain. And so the spinal cord does do, information processing, but the brain does the bulk of this for the body. Okay, so the brain has tons of sensory input coming in from everywhere in the body, regulating everything. It has sensory information coming in about muscle tone, You know, body temperature, pH, blood pressure, you know, how full your bladder is, that's mechanical pressure, okay? And your brain integrates all of that so we can regulate and coordinate, okay? So the spinal cord and the brain are the central functional aspects of the nervous system, okay? But, you know, so basically, how does your nervous system, you know, get into, how does it have such an intricate relationship with every tissue in your body? And that's through the use of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, the peripheral nervous system are basically the nerves that branch out from either the brain, called the cranial nerves, out to your head, neck, and upper shoulders, or you got the vagus nerve that goes down all the way down to your lower abdominal viscera, okay? Or you've got spinal nerves that branch out from your spinal cord and integrate into, you know, all your major tissues of the body. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system is how the brain and spinal cord reach out to all your tissues. All right, and there are two major divisions of the peripheral nervous system. Mainly what we're saying here are really, there's two types of information involved with the peripheral nervous system. There's either information coming in, sensory input, or there's information going out, motor output. Okay, we would call this afferent, you know, if we're talking about sensory input going into the nervous system, and we would call this efferent, you know, output going away from the nervous system out to a tissue, I should say the central nervous system. Okay, so if you want to talk about the sensory aspect of this, all right, the sensory input, there's really two major areas of the body where input is coming in. You know, visceral sensory input, meaning these are the sensory nerves that you find within the viscera, the organs of the body, okay, that are, you know, sensitive to changes in, again, pH, pressure, you know, just lots of stuff, you know, lots of different stimuli that could affect those organs. Okay, then you've got somatic sensory neurons. These are the nerves you're going to find in your muscle and your skin. All right, your muscle and your skin. All right, regulating things like temperature, touch, you know, pressure, muscle tension, things like that. Okay, so we've got input coming in again from two major areas: your skin and your muscles, your somatic, your very peripheral organs, and your visceral sensory, your more deeper organs of the body. Okay. And then another major division of the peripheral nervous system is the motor aspect. And again, that's the efferent or the output aspect. Okay. And basically, you know, this can be broken down into two parts as well. You've got the somatic motor division. Now, one key thing to remember about the somatic motor division is that this is conscious. Okay. We have conscious control over this. When I say somatic motor, think of a spinal nerve going out to a muscle. Okay, because remember, you know, skeletal muscles cannot cannot consciously contract without the help of a nerve. Okay, so if I'm, you know, again, you know that I pace around a lot or use a lot of hand gestures, and when I write, okay, I plan that all out. Okay, I plan that all out in the brain. I coordinate all that information, and then I send it down the spinal cord, out the appropriate motor neurons to the appropriate muscles so I can have these specific movements I desire to create. Okay, so somatic motor, this is the conscious aspect of the nervous system, okay, at least of the peripheral nervous system, I should say. All right, and then when it comes to the other aspect of motor output, okay, you know, there is the visceral motor. All right, this is what's often called, I'm going to abbreviate this, ANS, the autonomic nervous system. When I say autonomic, think, if you want to think synonymous with autonomic, think automatic. Okay, meaning this is where we have unconscious control. Okay, these are all this is the vast majority of the nervous system in terms of regulation is unconsciously regulating our environment. Okay, I mean, you don't sit there and tell yourself, all right, I've got to, you know, when you're sitting down, you stand up. You don't sit there and consciously think, all right, I've got to constrict blood vessels in my legs so gravity doesn't pull all the blood down, and so blood, you know, so I want to do that so I don't pass out. Okay, that's just a reflexive mechanism. Okay, and that's how we unconsciously regulate our internal environment is through reflexes. Okay, some reflexes are a lot more complex than others. But realistically, that's what happens. We have a stimulus, okay? We have some kind of change in our physiology. We have sensory input, okay, going into the central nervous system. We process that, and then we send it back out through motor nerves, and we have a response. We have a reaction, Okay, that's basically a reflex. I mean, and again, I say basically a reflex. Okay, and there are two major divisions of the visceral motor, the visceral motor aspect of our peripheral nervous system. You know, the autonomic nervous system, and these divisions are what we call, again, I have them abbreviated, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Realistically, what these are peripheral nerves. They go to two major areas of the body: blood vessels and visceral organs. Okay, realistically, a big part of what these divisions do is they help regulate smooth muscle activity of certain organs and regulate blood flow to certain tissues. Okay, so and again, I'm speaking in basic matters here. All right, so the peripheral nervous system, and a big part of this autonomic nervous system is, you guys have heard of the fight or flight response and how we deal with stress. Okay, so that's a big part of how this works. And again, I'll go more into the autonomic later on. But in a nutshell, this is what the nervous system is. Okay, it's an organ system that touches all aspects of your body via nerves. Okay, and in doing so, we, through the means of, from taking in sensory information, we can coordinate our physiologic responses so we can regulate the activity of our body. Okay, and then again, the nervous system is broken down into two major divisions: central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and then just the various types of peripheral nerves. In general, we have peripheral nerves going into the spinal cord or directly into the brain. Those are sensory neurons. Those are afferent neurons. Okay, and then we've got output nerves, motor neurons, going out to our major tissues in the body. Okay, and then we break these down into two general divisions: visceral and somatic. So there's a lot of nerves that are associated with our viscera, our internal organs, and then like when you hear viscera, you think of like gut, your gut organs and things like that. Of course, more to it than that. And then you've got your somatic sensory, your more peripheral tissues, your skin and muscle. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's really the nervous system, and the roles that it plays. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind, that all of this is done via neurons. Okay, and in the next video segment, I want to talk more about the neuron itself, the major parts of a neuron, and the characteristics of the neuron.